Hey, what's going on guys? It's FPL Yusuf and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. Today we're going to start part one of a three-part series where we're going to go into all positions in FPL: defense, midfield, attack, and we're going to cover all different types of price ranges just to give you guys the most information when trying to build your first draft. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, welcome back guys. Thank you so much for joining me for another video today. Before we start, if you wouldn't mind dropping a like down below and subscribing if you are new around here, it would be very much appreciated. But what are we going to talk about in today's video? We're going to cover everything. We're going to cover expected goals, expected assists, every type of stat. We're going to cover it just to try and give you guys the most information that you can have before trying to build your first team. So let's just get into this. Okay, so like I said, this is going to be part one of a three-part series. I have included goalkeepers in this one, so I'm going to do goalkeepers and defenders together. I'll start with the goalkeepers first because there's not really too much to talk about them. I think most people will kind of have that as their last priority when picking an FPL team. But I'm going to give you guys a range of different price ranges, like I said, for all positions, just in case you wanted to prioritize a premium or you wanted to go for a bit of a cheaper goalkeeper and save money elsewhere. We're going to cover all of it. So let's start off. We're going to start off with the most expensive. We're going to start off with David Raya. Now he is priced in at 5.5 million, and he's the only goalkeeper that I've got, as you can see on screen, who I think is actually worth paying the money for. It's no secret how good Arsenal's defense was last season. They kept 18 clean sheets. As you guys can see on screen, David Raya is expected to concede only 0.75 goals per 90 minutes, which means he's expected to concede less than one goal a game, which for a defender, a goalkeeper, whoever, that is brilliant numbers. I think with Arsenal's goalkeeper in particular, it's kind of either a 6-pointer or a 2-pointer. Because of how good Arsenal's defense are, he doesn't really make a lot of saves. So if Arsenal do lose the clean sheet, that is one thing to bear in mind, is that you're probably only going to end up with a 2-pointer, whereas some other goalkeepers you might end up with 3, 4, 5. But it's also a valid point to remember, and it's something that I'm going to repeat throughout this video, is with the new changes to the bonus point system, every time your team concedes a goal, you're going to lose 4 bonus points in your overall system. And we're going to come on to that with certain other players in defence. But with Arsenal, I think they are just a safe bet. I know they are priced quite high this year, but like I said, because of that, all that points to do with the bonus point system, I don't think it's actually a bad idea to invest somewhat in their defense, maybe even possibly a double up. So yeah, David Raya is going to start us off at the premium end with 5.5. Then we're going to jump onto two of the £5 million goalkeepers. Now, one of them we didn't really get to see much last year, and that is Nick Pope. Obviously, he was out for a while. Has got quite a good expected goals conceded as well. He's just over 1. He's coming at 1.07 per 90 for Newcastle. And I do expect Newcastle to be a lot stronger defensively this year. I think with the addition of him coming back in, Nick Pope is on his day probably top 3, top 4 goalkeepers in the league. So I think that was a part of the reason why Newcastle's defense last season wasn't so good. I think Trippier had a few mistakes in him. There was probably a whole lot of Tonali wasn't there, which obviously would provide cover in the midfield. So there's probably a few reasons as to why Newcastle weren't as great as they were the season before. But I think with Nick Pope coming back, I think they can only get better. And I think at 5 million with the opening fixtures that Newcastle have, I think he's definitely a viable option to own. Now, Emi Martinez is the other goalkeeper coming in at 5 million. He is in the same sort of category as Nick Pope. I think fairly priced as well. Aston Villa, again, also have good fixtures to start their opening sort of 6-7 games. He obviously has, as you can see on screen, a much higher expected goals conceded so far than Raya or Pope. I think Aston Villa aren't a bad team defensively. I just think that there's maybe not enough cover in the midfield to protect the back four at times, which is why his expected goals conceded is so high. He's coming in at 1.43, so you're almost expecting a goal and maybe one more per game, which obviously on paper isn't great, but we all know what Emi Martinez can do. The season prior he had before this, he was a top scorer for keepers by quite some distance. So we all know he's got the pedigree there. It's just whether or not that comes into practice. But I think they're both keepers there, Pope and Martinez, are both fairly priced in at 5 million. And like I said, they both got great fixtures to start the season with. Okay, so now we come on to the 4.5 goalkeepers, which is probably what I assume most people will be looking at. The first one I'm going to start off with is Robert Sanchez. Now, doesn't really matter Chelsea keeper-wise because they're all priced at 4.5 million. So whether it's Sanchez, whether it's Petrovic, whether they get someone else in, they're all sort of priced around the same value. I think a lot of Chelsea fans, what I've been seeing, are expecting Sanchez to start. He did start in their preseason game against Wrexham yesterday. They did draw that game. I think it was 2-2 by the end of it. I think Sanchez only played one half, did concede one goal. But yeah, preseason, can't really read too much into it. Now, he was sort of in and out of the team last year. He had spells, but obviously Petrovic played for Chelsea. I do think he's going to be Chelsea's number one, and I do expect Chelsea to be a lot better this year. Defensively, more so than just them as in general. So I do think Sanchez is conceding ratio is going to be a lot lower this year. And then we come on to our other 4.5 million keeper in Mark Flecken. Now, Flecken's a weird one because I don't think Brentford were that great defensively last year, despite the fact that I believe they finished in the top 5 of defenses. He actually has quite a high expected goals conceded per game, which is coming in at 1.73. So he's almost conceding nearly 2 goals a game. However, with the addition of Rico Henry coming back in, I think Brentford as well, just as a team, will be a better structured this year. I do expect that to be a lot lower. I think a lot of us were frustrated last year with Flecken because we owned him for most of the season. It was only towards the back end that he started to sort of turn up and come into some sort of form. So yeah, I think for the 4.5 millions, they are my best picks. There's a couple of other keepers that I could have mentioned, Leno or Nana from Man United, but I just thought that this selection here, we covered all price points. I think it gives you a good basis just to sort of pick which goalkeepers you want to go with. Okay, so on to defenders now. Now we're going to start off at the lower end. We're going to start off at the 4.5 millions because this is, I think, going to be the category that interests people the most. So as you can see, I've got 5 on screen right now. So we'll start off with Ben Mee, as we were just talking about Brentford. Obviously, he was missed the last part of the season due to injury, which was unfortunate. But like I said, with him starting the season fresh, Rico Henry coming back in, I do expect Brentford to have a better season in general. I think since they've come into the Premier League, we've known them to be quite a solid side who on their day can genuinely beat anyone. I think last season we maybe lost that a little bit, probably due to injuries, lack of squad depth for them. But I think this season I do expect them to be back and to bounce back as well. Ben Mee, for a defender, and out of all the Brentford defenders, has probably got the highest expected goal threat, which, obviously when you're picking defenders, that it's not the main reason that comes into thinking, but I think it's something you should consider. If you could pay that 0.5 million more for someone who has a goal threat, it just gives you an extra route to points. And I think across that Brentford line, Rico Henry at 4.5 million is still a good pick, but I just think Ben Mee, last season was priced, I believe, at 5 million. I think was just a little bit too pricey on him, but now it's come back to that 4.5 million bracket. I think is a more than viable option. Okay, the next person we're going to get onto is Murillo from Nottingham Forest. Now, Nottingham Forest defense last season, I believe they ranked 4th in overall defensive ability. And, for me, I think Forest are a very, very good side defensively. Murillo doesn't offer that much attacking threat, but I do expect him to have a big season this year. He's still very young. He's 21 years old. But like I said, Nottingham Forest have signed a new goalkeeper who, judging by all accounts, is quite a good keeper. So that can only help to their chances of clean sheets. And yeah, again, coming in at 4.5 million, you kind of want players who, again, also have a good start to the season with fixture-wise, and Murillo and Nottingham Forest certainly do that. There's going to be a part of the video at the end where I come on looking at pairing the two 4.5s, because I think a lot of people will probably own 1, maybe 2 of the premiums, and then look for maybe 2 or maybe even 3 of the 4.5s that they could sort of rotate each week. So yeah, bear in mind that at the end of the video, I will have a sort of 2 or 3 different pairings that I feel like fixture-wise could rotate quite nicely together. Okay, so the next one is going to be Joachim Andersen. Now, I know there's a lot of debate between him or Mark Gahey. It is close because Crystal Palace have improved defensively massively. I think Joachim Andersen just offers a little bit more goal threat than Mark Gahey does. He obviously offers just a little bit more assist threat as well with those long diagonal passes. So I've just picked him over Mark Gahey. But if you are someone who was worried about, team selected percentage, then I think Gahey's definitely the better option, because I think Joachim Andersen stands at, I think he's nearly at the 25% mark for team selected. So you can see a lot of people already jumping on that wave with him. And the final 2 are probably the most 2 anticipated in the 4.5s, and that is Ezri Konsa and Dan Burn. Now, these 2, again, same as we talked about, the goalkeepers have got very good opening fixtures, and I think that is important because, especially with the way transfers stack this year, if you can find a way to limit how many transfers you're having to make by owning both of these 2, knowing that they've got good fixtures and they can rotate well, I think that's just one less headache to worry about. So I think either 2 are good options. Ezri Konsa was in my previous video about the rules, where he was in the top 10 of most fouled, which, contributing towards bonus points is going to help. The same way Dan Burn was also in the most goal line clearances. So both of them have their upsides for bonus points as well. But I think, a lot of people, I think you'll see end up owning at least one of them, if not both of them. So that's just a brief summary of the 4.5 million defenders. We'll get on to the mid-price defenders now and have a look at them in more detail. Okay, so mid-price defenders. I put this down anywhere between 5 million and 5.5. 6 and above I've put down as my premium bracket. So yeah, we're going to start off with Pedro Porro first up. A lot of people's heroes last season with, the corners he was taking, the attacking threat he was going to get. I am worried about him this year. I think 5.5 is just a bit too steep for me, and I'll tell you the reason why. With the change to the bonus point system, where you lose 4 bonus points every time you concede a goal, I think that is going to massively affect how Pedro Porro scores in game. We saw last season that there was times where Tottenham were conceding 2, maybe even 3 goals, but because Porro was getting attacking returns, he was still finding himself in the bonus points. I think this year, I think even if he does continue to get his attacking returns, as you can see, it's 0.27 expected goal involvements per game, which is very good for a fullback. But I think even with that, just the fact that Spurs, they didn't look that good defensively last year. And I think with the change to the bonus point system in terms of you're going to lose points every time they concede, I think it's just going to cancel out Pedro Porro's attack. If he was at 5 million, the same as Udogie, maybe there was an argument to be had. I haven't included Udogie in this list, but that is another player you could consider saving the 0.5 million. But I think just at 5.5, for me, the way Spurs defend, it's just too much. And that brings me nicely on to Kyle Walker, who's the other 5.5 million. And to be honest with you, it's exactly the same reason why I probably wouldn't go near him. I think City defenders in general, other than probably Gavardio, which we'll come on to in the next bit, I think they're either a 2-pointer or a 6-pointer. And I think that's a very dangerous game to sort of live. Now, City alongside Arsenal were the only other team to have an under 1 goal expected against, which, you'd probably expect that with Man City just because of how good they are. But I think the problem is that I think to all the owners who've owned Ederson in the past, I think you'll be able to emphasize with this more so, is that when they lose the clean sheet, it's just a 2-point haul. And for me, I want someone who's going to offer me a chance of, either a goal or an assist. And I don't think Kyle Walker really does that for Man City either. He might get the odd extra bonus points here or there, but it's very rare. So for me, the two guys marked in at 5.5 million, I wouldn't be personally looking at them right now. Now, on to someone that I cannot wait to talk about. He has been in every draft that I've made so far, and that is Daniel Munoz from Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace had a massive upturn in form for the last 10 games of the season. And I think it's partly 2 reasons. One, because, Oliver Glasner came in and kind of revamped how Crystal Palace play. But 2 was because they brought in Daniel Munoz at January and played him at the wing-back spot on the right-hand side, and he was excellent. Now, he has been flying for Colombia over the past few months as well, like scoring. He scored, I think, like 4 or 5 goals for them. So you can see that he's got that attacking threat. And I think with the departure of Michael Olise from Crystal Palace, I think that's just going to give him more license to go up that right-hand side. So for me personally, he is one player that so far in every draft that I've done, I've had him in there. Now, I think the 5 million bracket is a little bit weird because most people want to rotate their 4.5 millions. So with the 5 million, I don't know if there's some sort of like underlying thought that you kind of have to start them because they're a little bit more expensive, and maybe benching them just seems a little bit criminal at times because you paid that little bit extra for them. But for this man, I think he's worth it. The way Crystal Palace are playing with their wing backs, and especially the way he's been playing over the last few months, I think he just, for me, there's a reason why I keep putting him in every draft, and that's just because the attacking threat he offers, the defensive side of things that Crystal Palace offer as well, I think they just go hand in hand. Now, the last two that I'm going to talk about is Tarkowski and Ian Maatsen. Now, we'll start with James Tarkowski first. You could go with Jared Branthwaite, but his goal involvement is virtually non-existent, whereas Tarkowski does offer a little bit more threat from set pieces, from corners, things like that. So for me, I've picked him in there over Jared Branthwaite. But one player that I didn't add in my 4.5s, which I would just advise if you are going to go for an Everton defender, I would just go for Mykolenko if he's still here. Now, I know he's had a lot of transfer rumours linking him away, but to be honest with you, if he starts the season and you see that he's here at 4.5 million, I think he's just worth saving that extra 0.5 for an Everton defender. Now, Ian Maatsen's an interesting one because Aston Villa have spent a lot of money on him. However, they do have 2 other very viable left backs in Lucas Digne and Alex Moreno, who both on any given day can play very well and are very attacking. Now, Ian Maatsen, number-wise, has got 0.42 goal involvements per game, which is crazy good. Now, obviously, his sample size is very small because obviously he spent a lot of time out in Borussia Dortmund. I think he only played maybe like 1 or 2 games for Chelsea last season before he went out on loan. So his sample size is very small. So take that with a pinch of salt. However, I do think that for the price that they've paid for him, I can't see him either not being a starter or having like games where he's sort of rotate in and out. I just think if you're going to pay that much money for a player, you're going to want to play them. So yeah, coming at £5 million, I think it's a fair price. Obviously, Aston Villa got a great start to the season, like I've mentioned before. So I think he's definitely a viable option, but I don't know if there's much difference between him and maybe going for a 4.5 million for Konsa. That is the decision that we as managers are going to have to make. Okay, so now time for my favorite part of the video, and that is the premiums. So as of right now, I've actually made sort of 2, 3, 4 different drafts where I've had a minimum of 2 of the premiums in there, and I've been trying to fit a third one in. So we'll start off at the lower end, and we'll start off at the 6 millions. So we're going to start with Kieran Trippier first. Now, he had a very good start to the season last year. I think a lot of us will remember since that. I think it was, I can't remember what game it was, but he got like 2, 3 assists, and then he went on a run of like sort of 5, 6 games where he was just coming up with the goods. He's such a bonus point magnet as well. Then he done a complete U-turn and went the complete opposite way. He was making mistakes, he was conceding goals, and the goals that Newcastle were conceding were because of him. I think Trippier for me now is maybe it's just a step too far for a 6 million price tag. I think, you know, he's a year older. Has he got the legs to keep going? He's just played a whole Euro tournament for England as well. So whether he'll be back or not in time for that first game, I'm not sure. But also Livramento, when he did come in last season, was very good. You know, a lot younger. I think he's 22 now, so, you know, fitter, younger, faster. I do just wonder if maybe now the Trippier boat has sailed just ever so slightly. And I think at 6 million, I don't think it's anything that you can really put into consideration, unfortunately. So the Arsenal boys, Saliba and Ben White. Now there's only 0.5 difference between these guys. In an ideal world, I would have both of them if I'm being truthful with you, but I think it's just too much budget to spend. Now, we all know what we're going to get. Saliba is probably the best centre-back in the league right now. Had a great tournament with France individually. You know, when he comes back into their Arsenal side, you know, he was a massive reason as to why they kept 18 clean sheets last year and why their expected goals is so low. But also Ben White is also just as much a part of that conversation as anyone as that in that back four. But he also offers an assist threat, which I think for me personally, I do actually think he's worth the 6.5 million price tag that he's been given. I was hoping at the start of the season that, you know, Saliba, Gabriel would be priced at 5.5 and Ben White would be 6. But I think even at 6.5, I do think he's worth it. And I think if you kept him over the course of the season, you would see he'd probably end up in top 3, top 4 of highest point scoring defenders. So yeah, for me, the Arsenal defenders, you know, I don't think there's any question in anyone's mind whether they're worth it or not. You know, defensively, they are the best team in the league. Like I said, the fact that the bonus points is affected so much by goals conceded, I think it just makes those Arsenal defenders that much more attractive. Now, Gvardiol, he goes against everything that I've said about Man City so far. He is one player for that City back line that I don't think is a 6 or a 2. And especially towards the end of last season, we saw what he can do going forward. He looks very dangerous, and he's a player that I really like. And I do think at 6 million, I think he's worth every penny. And I think you'll see him in a lot of people's teams come the start of the season. And rightly so. You know, City are going to win most of the games they play. They're probably going to, hopefully, you'd like to think from an FPL point of view, they're going to keep more clean sheets. I think that's one thing that they've always been labelled with, is that they'll win the game 4, they'll score 4, they'll score 5, they'll score 6, but they will always concede 1. And I know that's why they were looking at possibly replacing Edison. But I think Gvardiol at £6 million is just worth it. I think he's worth getting to that City defence for, because, like I said, they will win. There's certain games that they will just dominate and they will win. They'll keep the clean sheet without even breaking a sweat. But also with the attacking side of his game, I think just something which gives you that little bit of upside as well. So yeah, for me, Gvardiol at 6 million, definitely a must-have. I'm going to say I think he's worth it. I think he's someone you should be starting the season with. And finally, another man who has not left my drafts, and that is Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, 7 million, especially if you're going with Haaland in your draft, is a bit steep, but I do think Trent's worth it. You know, Arnie's slot last season, his fullback, I think ended up with like 13 goal involvements from right back. Now, that's just your every average right back. I'm not saying that one was bad, but Trent is the best with the ball at his feet. We all know how good he is going forward. And it's an exciting prospect for me to actually wonder what he's going to be able to do in this Liverpool side this season. I do think that they will be better defensively. You know, they weren't really that good last year. They weren't keeping clean sheets. I think they only got about 6 or 7 of them. So by their standards, it's very below par. But I do expect a big upturn in that from Liverpool this year. And I think Trent, for me, at 7 million, with the fact of how good he is on bonus points as well, I think it's just, that one there has to be a no-brainer. I think if you can afford to get him in there, I wouldn't even hesitate about it. Especially also, they play, I think Ipswich is their first game. I'll leave all the fixtures on screen so you guys can see, but I think their starting run is very, very good. So I think that it's another thing which just makes Trent that much more appealing to me. Okay, right, combinations. Now, I'm going to put my top 3 favourite rotation teams on screen now that you guys can see. And the first one up is going to be Newcastle and Fulham. Now, I actually didn't put Anthony Robertson in my £4.5 million defenders, which was something that I was umming and ahhing about. But I do definitely think if you are looking around that price bracket and you want a Fulham defender for this reason, I think he's definitely top of that list. As you can see, Newcastle and Fulham, with the first 3 games between them both, play the top 3 promoted teams. So you would expect most likely 2 out of 3 clean sheets. Well, you'd hope so. You'd hope for 3, but I think you'd definitely see clean sheets there. And, you know, with all of these pairings that I've got on screen, I think up until game week 10, bar maybe 1 or 2 weeks, you've pretty much got a good rotation piece there. So yeah, for me, first one up is going to be Newcastle and Fulham. Again, both defenders from their teams can be bought in at 4.5 million. Both keepers could be bought from 5 million. So yeah, I think that's my first and probably my best pairing that actually rotates quite nicely. Second team that's going to rotate nicely is going to be Newcastle and Everton. Like I said, Mikalenko in at 4.5 million with a Dan Burn at 4.5 million. Again, you can just chop and change them. One of them starts depending on who's got the better fixture, one of them on the bench, depending on who's got the worst fixture. Like I said, when you get to that sort of £5 million bracket with Tarkowski, you feel a little bit bad benching them because you spent that extra 0.5 million. But where you've got the 4.5s, you can just chop and change them as you like. So yeah, for me, Newcastle and Everton coming in at my second favourite rotation pairing. And my final rotation pairing is going to be Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace. Murillo, Joachim Andersen, Mark Gahey, someone like that. Again, both keepers can be bought in at 4.5. You've got Miguel from Forest, you've got Dean Henderson from Crystal Palace. So yeah, I'll leave the fixtures on screen for you guys so you can see how they rotate and depending on what game weeks. Like I said, I think game week 7 for pretty much most of the teams is going to be a little bit a problem for a lot of them. But I think if you said that to someone at the start of the season, for the first 10 game weeks, you maybe have 1 or 2 that would struggle rotating. I think for the most part, we'd end up taking that because, like I said, with the importance of transfers this year and rolling them, not having to worry about chopping and changing the £4.5 million defenders, I think is quite a big thing. So yeah, for me, I think these are my top 3 favourite rotation pairings. Newcastle Fulham first, Newcastle Everton second, and Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace in at number 3. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a thumbs up and subscribe down below. Like I said, this is part 1 of a 3-part series where, I'll cover the midfielders and I'll cover the forwards as well. We'll take a look at all different price ranges from the lower end to the mid-range prices and obviously the premiums as well. I'll also be back with an FPL challenge video. That's gone live now. We've got the first 4 game weeks, so I'll go over all 4 of them and I'll drop a video up hopefully sometime this week for that one as well. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, like I said, just once again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a thumbs up and subscribe down below, and I'll catch you guys next time.